Hey, I'm Blair Best. It's Monday here on The Story, and tonight we're following an earthquake near Seattle this morning, the strongest in the region since 2019. Should we be worried about more quakes in the near future? What experts have to say. Plus, an opinion editor at The Oregonian joins us live after publishing a piece that puts the Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega Pederson on blast. But first, Portland City Councilor Dan Ryan also joins us live. We hear what he has to say about budget problems that many blame on the past administration, one that he was a part of. It's our big story tonight. The city of Portland is facing a historic budget gap of $93 million in its general fund. On Friday, the city administrator's office released the first draft of proposed cuts to departments. They include nearly 300 layoffs and cuts to major departments. If you missed our story on Friday, we dove into the details. Check it out later tonight on the KGW YouTube page. But a major question mark hangs over how the city will pay for existing homeless shelters, let alone new ones the mayor wants to open as part of his plan to end unsheltered homelessness by the end of this year. A big reason for the historic shortfall, city leadership blames one-time federal dollars they got during the pandemic that were used to start programs, but there was no plan in place to pay for those programs once the money ran out. And now it has. So it's up to the new 12-person city council and Mayor Keith Wilson to clean up the mess that some in the city blame on the former mayor Ted Wheeler and the city's 4 commissioners in our old form of government, simply passing the tough decisions on to the new administration. The current city council is mostly fresh faces, new to city government. But there is one person who served as a commissioner during Ted Wheeler's time and who won election to our current council as well. He joins us live tonight, Councilor Dan Ryan. He was first elected to Portland City Council in 2020 and is now serving District 2 in North and Northeast Portland on our new council. Councilor Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Blair. It's great to be here.
So let's get right to it. Many are blaming one-time dollars the city got during the pandemic for much of the shortfall that we're seeing now. Now, since you served on council during that time, tell us, were there talks of what would happen once that money ran out? And did you do anything to try and prevent this type of shortfall from happening?
Absolutely, we had those conversations. We had those conversations about every investment, that there would be a ramp up and then there would be a ramp down. And what was most important is that we focused with those investments on our top 3 priorities: public safety, homelessness, and economic development. I can speak to 2 that I was behind and promoted to the rest of the council and were passed. One was actually moving our permitting bureau from the disorganized 7 bureaus to aligning it into one streamlined division. That became apparent for many, many decades, and we needed to focus on economic development. So we got some continuous improvement experts into the budget back at that time, and they were the cat herders that actually allowed us to streamline the permitting system. The other one, which you followed closely, was the development of the Safe Rest Villages. We were suffering in the humanitarian crisis, still are, but we were really suffering at that moment and not really providing any services that those who were chronically homeless were saying yes to, and that we were getting them into stability. We are now noticing that at the Safe Rest Villages, the results are much better than the traditional shelters that we had prior to that. And I'm proud of that, and I know that those proof points have been noticed, and that's why those are now being incorporated into the system, delivery system that we desperately need in our city and in our county.
So I know those are great programs, but were there any talks, and did you have a plan for when that money was going to run out?
We had a plan, of course we did. We were hoping that, 1, we would be able to streamline the permitting system in this window of time, check. We were also hoping that we would get some proof points that said these new services for shelters would actually get better results than what we were seeing, check. And so both of those were what you do with a one-time investment. You do it to stimulate the enterprise so you can actually make some systemic improvements that were desperately needed. All of the other money that I know of that went out into the community, all of those gifts, if you will, went out with a lot of clarity that this was one-time funding. Everyone knew this was coming. It was not a surprise. What's probably been more surprising and challenging is our revenue is down because we aren't generating as much investment and revenue in the city of Portland. And so that's what we must continue to do if we're going to bring back my hometown.
So Council President told me on Friday that you all will be digging beyond what was proposed as far as the cuts in the initial document. Any idea of where you will be looking for alternative ways to fill this gap?
Yeah, I think there's some actually big opportunities here. I've always in my career used these opportunities as a way to do some culture change, some work that's been needed for some time. Two bigger ideas on that would be where we see some duplication of services. We have a centralized services, and then we have growing services that do the same thing within our bureaus. So where you say human resources, communication, procurement for a few, where you see those duplications, we need to ensure that if it is the centralized system, that it's fluid enough and responsive enough to make sure that we're giving the customer service that's necessary. And we have to start there. We also could look at some of the non-current critical mission services within our other bureaus. For example, we have some duplication, in my opinion, of planners and engineers. If they're working on projects that we have no money for, there's nothing in the forecast that will have money for those services, then those positions could be eliminated and we could focus on those that are filling the potholes as opposed to those that are planning 10 years out for something that we have no money in line for. So it's going to be tough, but it's necessary. And there are some duplications that actually needed to happen, just like we saw with permitting, where you can make those cuts that actually improve the system. I was pruning all weekend, so anyone that gardens knows this. You got to prune to grow and to actually bear better fruit.
We know one of the groups to face the most cuts, 52 potential cuts, is Vibrant Communities, which you served as commissioner. How do you foresee those cuts, if they go into place, impacting downtown revitalization efforts?
Yeah, well, Vibrant Communities is basically parks is what you're speaking to, I believe, Blair, because the other two are smaller programs. One's restricted and the other is tiny. But with parks, it's going to be tough, but you have to make some decisions that look at where we might have, again, some duplication of services. We have some extra people doing those same jobs within parks that they're centralized, that could be a part of the enterprise that Mike Jordan speaks of. And so I think that's one. You also have to look at the geography and where we're seeing the highest usage at our community centers. And if there's some that have lower usage, those could be vulnerable. I'd rather make sure that what we do well, and make sure that we keep providing swim lessons, we keep providing recreational activities for elders. We have to make it so people want to continue to move here, raise their families here, and age in place here. And so really being focused on those services. But there's an opportunity here to see some duplication within Vibrant Communities as well. And I don't think we're going to see the same number, Blair, of the work areas that we currently have. I'm sure those could be trimmed down. And on all of that, I'm looking forward to what Mayor Wilson and City Administrator Mike Jordan will bring to us. They only brought us a partial budget, and we need to see the 100% fully loaded, and I look forward to that coming from the two of them. I know they're having the same conversations, but that's what I've been telling.
And as it stands right now in that draft partial recommendations, police, fire, 911, Portland Street Response, they won't be facing any cuts. Do you believe it will stay that way?
I'll sure support that. I think it's not a time for us to make one penny cut. In fact, we should be investing in public safety at this time. Portlanders want to feel safe. We know that we need a high functioning police and fire bureau with the city of Portland at this time.
Another big question mark hangs over the mayor's $28 million plan to build more shelter beds, day centers. As we previously just talked about, you led the city's Safe for Us Villages program, so you know what it takes to financially open shelters. Any idea how you might look to fund the mayor's shelter plan, or do you anticipate his plan changing?
I think that the mayor, first of all, it added to the deficit, the 28 million, and so, but it's also something that will add to what I think Portlanders wanted. That's why he was elected mayor. I know he's out there working the halls of government, other government agencies, and also the private sector. So I look forward to what Mayor Wilson comes to the table with. I know he won't come empty-handed. We know that about this mayor. He's enthusiastic, he's optimistic, and he's making the case on why Portland's a good investment at this time. And I look forward to hearing about where he's coming up with that revenue.
And for the first time, there are 12 people on City Council facing this massive task of closing this historic gap. On Friday, the city administrator hinted that each councilor has 12 strong opinions about 12 different things. How do you think it's going to go trying to get a majority to agree on where to make cuts?
It's our job. And so our job is to come together as one council and make sure that we get it done with a balanced budget that preserves our basic services. It allows us to get focused on our primary mission. Our best days are here to come if we, as a group of 12, behave as a group that is working together to do our best for Portland at this time. I have faith in my colleagues, and I know there'll be some tension. I know that we're all passionate about what we want, but it's not a time to go back to all of our campaign promises. It's time to be focused on where we are today. Focus on the core services that run this city, and together we will build it back. We have to go from being 80 out of 81 cities in the country in terms of investment and reputation, and we have to move that up. And when that starts to move up, there'll be revenue in the near future. But we have to focus today on the basics.
Councilor Dan Ryan, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome, Blair. Take care.
All right, so that's where things stand right now as far as the city of Portland is concerned. But they're not alone. For more than a week now, we've been covering Multnomah County's budget problems, what Chair Jessica Vega Pederson calls a catastrophic budget deficit of $104 million in their homeless services department. There have been talks of closing shelters, canceling outreach work, and eliminating rent assistance, just a few of the ideas to fill the hole. Chair Vega Pederson asked the state, regional metro, and surrounding counties for millions of dollars to help. And let's just say that request was not met with open arms or wallets. But in a shred of good news, depending on how you look at it, today we learned more than $30 million of that budget shortfall was money actually meant for reserves or contingencies, basically like a rainy day fund, money set aside to cover unexpected costs. The county is proposing they do not set any of that aside for this next fiscal year, meaning the actual budget deficit is closer to $70 million. Not great, but much less than $104 million. But that's not a done deal yet either. The county says they're working toward an agreement with Metro that would give us the flexibility not to refill those as part of our FY 2026 budget. It is still a policy choice our chair and board will have to decide, along with all other program and service reductions. And today, Metro told us they have, quote, consistently told Multnomah County that in a situation where reserves need to be used, they don't have to be immediately refilled. We increased reserve levels to 15% last year because of concerns about variations in year-to-year tax revenue. So it seems that agreement to ditch filling reserves this year is likely, but the $70 million hole that's left is still a good chunk of change. All of this budget drama and back and forth has many of you frustrated with how the county is handling your tax dollars and the crisis on our streets. We're going to get to some of your comments in just a minute. Trust me, there are a lot of them. Many of you lay the blame at the feet of County Chair Jessica Vega Pederson, and you're not alone. We think this article is worth your time. An op-ed published in the Oregonian over the weekend titled Vega Pederson's Solo Act Hits All the Wrong Notes. Its opening line reads, "Say this for Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega Pederson and her go-it-alone approach to leading the county. She makes it easy for the public and fellow elected officials to pick someone to blame." It goes on to say her news conference earlier this month alerting the public of the $104 million deficit for homeless services was, quote, unexpected, seeing as just last year the county had too much money, more than they knew what to do with, and now that's all gone. I'm told it was given to service providers, and now the county doesn't have enough to pay their bills, solidifying what the Oregonian editorial team says is, quote, the sense that the county is flailing for a strategy. So joining us now live is Helen Jung, the opinion editor for the Oregonian and the author of this editorial. Helen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you wrote what I imagine many of us are feeling right now. We hear a lot of frustration from our viewers about both the lack of accountability around how tax dollars are being spent for the county's homeless services and the chair's messaging around that. So what has been your take recently on how she's handled this budget gap?
I think one of the things that we're all feeling is a certain amount of whiplash because, as you noted, just a few years ago, or for the past few years, the county has had more than it can spend on homeless services. And so to go from that to last month's announcement that we're facing catastrophic cuts, that the county is going to have to close shelter beds and pull back on services that move people from homelessness to housing is alarming. I think it really makes you wonder if the county has a solid strategy, if they have a handle on their funding streams, and certainly I think there's a lot of questions that they need to answer about where all that money, it's about $1 billion since the 2022 fiscal year has gone.
Do you believe the chair called for help too early in this process?
I think so. I mean, again, as you noted, they're already walking back the size of the projected deficit. And that's a conversation they could have had with Metro before the press conference. But also, it's just, and that significant of a change really does undermine faith in the county's management. But also, the chair should not be unilaterally making this call for help from the state and Metro. The budget is not just up to her to decide. It's for the entire county commission to pass. And the city or the county has already made some commitments to the city as well. So if this is truly a collaborative process, which I think all the elected officials continue to emphasize, then they really need to show it by partnering with them, by having these open discussions as opposed to this unilateral call.
You wrote that staging unexpected hair on fire press conferences is not leadership. Can you expand on that?
Sure. I guess the suddenness of the press conference and the language she was using made it sound like the county had no clue that they were going to be getting less money in the coming year than they had this year. But they know that a big chunk of the budget has been relying on one-time dollars that weren't going to be renewed. Metro also let the county know back in December that it was going to be bringing in less money than projected and has been working with Multnomah as well as Clackamas and Washington counties to figure out a way to mitigate that. So it's just sort of this sense of hostage taking almost, where the chair is saying we're going to have to close and pull back on all these priorities that the public has. The county has made a number of promises to the public. It needs to find some way to fulfill them.
Helen Jung, opinion editor for The Oregonian. Thanks for coming on the show. We look forward to your next piece.
Great. Thanks very much.
All right, now let's get to some of your thoughts. Your emails and voicemails have been pouring in throughout our reporting on the county and city budget issues. Let's start with your take on Multnomah County's issues. We heard from a viewer named Mary who says she's lived in Multnomah County for over 60 years.
I have never seen such a lack of planning and waste of money with respect to the homeless issue. And I believe the chair of the Multnomah County Commission has just spent our dollars without any thought towards solving this problem and has just been ridiculously negligent in terms of failing to recognize the damage she's done to our city. I don't know what she's smoking.
Ken wrote to us, the first and most crucial step in getting county government back on track is to recall Jessica Vega Pederson immediately. She is so far over her head as county chair that every day she is in office means steps back in solving a whole host of crisis issues. Now, some of your comments came in following my reporting on the joint city and county meeting last week discussing the future of homeless services.
I was very impressed with Council Member Mitch Green. I agree with him that there is a lack of trust on the part of the public and a feeling that we are not getting good value for our tax dollars. I was pleasantly surprised to see the City Council pushing back on Jessica Vega Pederson, and I hope that they will continue demanding increased transparency, better metrics, and more accountability from Multnomah County.
Well, now it's your turn to weigh in, and we really do read all the emails and listen to all the voicemails, and I respond to as many as I can. Email us, thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090, or hit us up on social media. All right, coming up next on the story, an earthquake in Northwest Washington state this morning, the most intense in over 5 years. Should the rest of us in the Pacific Northwest be on guard for the big one? What experts have to say when the story returns. A magnitude 4.5 earthquake hit north of Seattle off Orcas Island at around 5 o'clock this morning. Damage was minimal, but the strength of the quake has many wondering if we should expect more of the underground movement in the Northwest. Eric Wilkinson went looking for answers.
We're getting reports of the quake being felt everywhere from the San Juan Islands all the way to King County. There are so far no significant reports of damage. However, the quake certainly did get a lot of people's attention.
1068.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by.
The day started very early for the crew at Dad's Diner in Anacortes. Jamie Miller was getting ready for work when it hit.
My dog started freaking out, being a little spaz, and so then I started to realize that everything in my house was shaking. Yeah.
Jamie immediately ran for the cover of a door jamb, just like she learned in school years ago.
It was like muscle memory, getting under a desk or a door jamb.
My dog alerted me. I thought there was somebody at the front door, and then I thought that person was flying a jet airplane into our house.
Damage from the quake was minimal, but it was strong enough to move Divina Liberty's Orcas Island barn a few inches off its foundation. Orcas was the epicenter for the quake. A smaller aftershock of 1.3 hit a few minutes later closer to Anacortes, sparking fears of a potential tsunami, but one never developed.
This is the epicenter right here where the star is.
Harold Tobin is Washington State's seismologist and director of the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. The network is continuously monitoring earthquake activity. Tobin says today's earthquake and other recent activity are nothing to be alarmed about.
Right now what we're seeing is certainly more activity than is just typical in a week, but not anything that is really unusual or out of our past experience of earthquakes in our region.
But Tobin says in the Northwest, we must never get complacent.
They don't happen very often, thankfully, the damaging ones, but when they come really when you least expect it, without warning.
We're told people in the San Juans can expect aftershocks for the next several weeks. Emergency responders tell us this is a great time to make sure you have a disaster plan for your family and home.
Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Straight Talk is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you ever miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air the episode at 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. over on our TV app, KGW+. You can download the free app right now. It's on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. A quick programming note for you. We will not have a show for you tomorrow night because of NBC's coverage of President Trump's speech to Congress. But we will be back with you Wednesday night, right here at 6:30.